Wehrmacht, the Nazi extermination machine. The German armed forces were a relentless force during the first half of World War II. With approximately 18 million soldiers in its ranks, it conquered 11 countries and participated in epic confrontations such as the Battle of France, the Battle of El Alamein, the Ardennes, and the Siege of Stalingrad. And in each, it displayed its full power. Its training, innovative strategies, cutting-edge technology, and unprecedented coordination between military divisions were the basis for Adolf Hitler's quest for global dominance. We will understand why the German army was the most outstanding in World War II. We will learn about its preparation, its victories, and its fall. Join us as we learn about the Wehrmacht. Origin. The etymology of the term Wehrmacht derives from the combination of two words from the German language. The verb wehren, which means to defend, and the noun Macht, which refers to power or strength. A literal meaning of the word could be defensive power, referring to the defense forces. This is how the name given to Germany's armed forces was formed in 1935, when its predecessor, the Reichswehr, was dissolved by the Nazis. During the course of World War II, the Wehrmacht was composed of the Army, Heer, the Navy, Kriegsmarine, and the Air Force, Luftwaffe. Beginning in 1940, the armed SS, Waffen-SS, was included. And in 1944, the People's Militia, Volkssturm. But now, let's focus on how the training of recruits was restructured for the formation of the new army. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, one of the most brilliant strategists of the war, popularized the motto Schweiß spart Blut, sweat saves blood. This epitomized the concept underlying the strict discipline with which future soldiers were trained. The process lasted 4 months, during which the men were accustomed to limited rest and food. Hygiene and order in the spaces were an inviolable rule. Those who failed to comply had to redouble their efforts by completing increasingly arduous endurance exercises. The recruitment center was the German military district, the Wehrkreis. There, cadets were taught the correct handling of the MP-18 submachine gun, and later the MP-40. Each platoon was equipped with a heavy machine gun, so everyone had to know how to operate it. Every individual who enlisted in the Wehrmacht was exposed to the values of the ideology promulgated by the National Socialist Party. The Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda of the Third Reich, Joseph Goebbels, had instituted a series of indoctrination directives in the German military district. The guidelines included Führer worship, anti-Semitism, the use of pro-regime media, partisan displays, and the establishment of Hitler youth groups. This exacerbated the nationalist sentiments of those enlisted. The goal was to leave behind the outdated conventions that had led that nation to defeat in the Great War. But training new recruits wasn't enough. It was also necessary to innovate cutting-edge plans and procedures for militaristic movements. Tactics and strategies. The geography of Germany is conditioned by its central location on the European continent. This meant that, in many confrontations, Germany was attacked from its eastern and western flanks simultaneously. Winning one front at full speed was essential to be able to deal solely with the remaining one. This is where the origins of the tactic known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, can be traced. This was based on the collective use of armored and air vehicles arranged in autonomous units to devastate rival armies in short periods of time. In this sense, momentum and speed became essential requirements for success. Poland, the first country invaded by Germany in World War II, was unprepared for a military deployment of such colossal magnitude, and German superiority was made clear to the world. But the Wehrmacht had other planned offensives. One of these was the frontal attack, which involved attacking the enemy's strongest point, thereby completely dismantling the opposing army by leaving its weakest links adrift. This implied that the Germans had to maintain overwhelming supremacy over the other. Otherwise, it would have no effect and would be extremely damaging. Another strategy employed was the flank attack, considered the most efficient. This aimed to surprise the enemy by attacking from the sides, hitting them in such a way that they had no time to adopt effective countermeasures. This maneuver sought to avoid frontal confrontations, seeking to break defensive lines and create vulnerability in the opposing army. Finally, there was the encirclement attack, which could be considered a combination of the previous two. It attacked one or two flanks of the defense, accompanied by a frontal attack that destabilized the opposing army and plunged it into absolute chaos. The countries that fell to the Blitzkrieg were Poland in 1939, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France in 1940, and Yugoslavia and Greece in 1941. In these confrontations, coordination between the different land, water, and air armies was essential. This challenge was achieved through unity of command. A single commander was elected and was responsible for the success or failure of the delegated mission. The Wehrmacht was divided into divisions, each consisting of 17,000 soldiers. The army contained the infantry and panzer divisions, the navy, the marine divisions, and the air force, the Hermann Göring, airborne, and field divisions. In addition, the Waffen-SS divisions were added. Leaders. It is important to emphasize the primary role that fell to the Wehrmacht commanders in planning and executing operations. One of the most prominent was Heinz Guderian, who served as chief of the General Staff of the Army High Command. He is known as the father of Blitzkrieg. Not for nothing was Guderian also nicknamed Heinz the Swift, thanks to his subordinates' witnesses of his veracity when planning an offensive at the front. His military talent brought victories to the Germans in Poland, France, and in the early stages of the Russian campaign. It would not be an exaggeration to assert that the Axis's sweeping victories during the first stage of World War II were largely due to the work of this strategist. Toward the end of the conflict, his friction with the Führer became increasingly frequent, and his scope for action was thus limited. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, can be counted as one of the military geniuses of the 20th century. If Guderian was one of the inventors of the Blitzkrieg, Rommel was the one who took this notion to its ultimate conclusion. During the Second World War, he took over as commander of the German Afrika Korps in North Africa. There, he repeated what he had done before, with improved armament and manpower. The briskness and alacrity of the mobile and dynamic offensive perfectly reflected Rommel's incisive temperament. Technology. The Führer was clear that his vision of a dominant Germany must be based on being a technologically innovative nation. Therefore, research was conducted and advances compared to other countries of its historical period were utilized. In terms of combat vehicles, the Panzer IV tank revolutionized the role of these vehicles. It was fast, easy to maneuver, and boasted a 75mm cannon. These mechanized beasts made a mockery of the Allied tanks, both in the Netherlands and France. Equally memorable was the Tiger, which far outweighed the Panzer, yet faced no obstacle. The baptism of fire for these colossi took place during the Battle of Stalingrad. But how did these killer beasts develop? After World War I, Germany was banned from producing tanks as a result of the agreement signed in the Treaty of Versailles. However, in 1923, through a secret agreement with the Soviet Union, it developed the design of several tanks and experimented with new tactics using armored vehicles. On the other hand, the Luftwaffe had become the terror of the skies. This was largely due to the Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, the emblem of German aviation. In the Battle of Britain, they pitted their forces against the Spitfires of the British Royal Air Force. On the continent, these aircraft deployed their attack power in blitzkriegs. Also worth mentioning were the Junker Ju-87s, Stukas, an abbreviation of a German term meaning dive bomber. A distinctive feature of these aircraft was that they had devices under their wings that emitted a terrifying noise when the Stuka was in a dive. Some compared this sound to the trumpets of Jericho in the Book of Revelation, those that announced the imminent end. Pervitin, the soldier's drug. The Germans were not content with experimenting with new weapons and methods of combat. They also sought to enhance the human body as a weapon of war. Pervitin is a synthetic drug that works as a psychostimulant. Initially, it was sold over the counter in pharmacies, hence its popularity among the German population. Young people consumed it to stay up all night studying or to go out dancing with friends. And as soon as army scientists confirmed its effects, they did not hesitate to distribute it en masse among soldiers on the front lines. Pervitin use among troops had a significant impact on the blitzkrieg against France, where Allied soldiers were appalled by the inhumane and lethal behavior exhibited by the Germans. These stimulants were also used on the Eastern Front and in the Battle of Berlin, but without the same results. Over time, the adverse effects of this use became apparent and brought all kinds of difficulties. Reports of Nazi soldiers collapsing, exhausted and unresponsive after marathon days without rest, multiplied. Cases of aggression toward their fellow soldiers were numerous. Withdrawal also caused depressive disorders, body tremors, and suicidal thoughts. In 1944, also on the Russian front, entire brigades of soldiers suffered severe bouts of insomnia, leading to collective psychotic episodes. Others suffered from paranoia exacerbated by the situation, leading them to shoot at enemies while they were invisible. Some displayed excessive euphoria, followed by a general collapse of their bodies. And when reinforcements arrived, alerted by the screams, they found rooms strewn with corpses on the floor, all thanks to Pervitin. Fall. The virtues of the Wehrmacht became the vices that buried this army in defeat. Unbridled confidence in the superiority of its troops led these combatants to embark on increasingly ambitious and impossible undertakings. This is without taking into account that, after the failure of Operation Barbarossa, the sheer number of casualties on the Eastern Front ultimately diminished the total number of troops in the Third Reich. This perspective is confirmed by the fact that the Soviets were the first to take Berlin, the capital of the empire that was to last 1,000 years. In conclusion, Wehrmacht casualties reached 3,533,000 soldiers. The number of wounded was 6 million, and prisoners of war about 11 million. The main battles in which this army triumphed were those in Poland, France, Denmark, and Norway. Their worst defeats were at Stalingrad, Kursk, Normandy, the Ardennes, and Berlin. Now, after examining the reasons why the German army was the best in the entire Second World War, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for being with us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next video.